questions.
All right.
Hi y'all, and hi to everyone on Zoom. Welcome to the TRIO hosted panel for Shifting Professional Standards. This is going to be kind of a conversation about how these four lovely K-State staff have navigated like workplace expectations in their life. And then we're going to open up the floor at the end for some questions and if you're looking for any advice. But I'll just kind of introduce everybody and then Policia is going to take over. So first, we've got Teresa Parks from the Career Center. We've got Kevin Santos Flores from Multicultural Student Center. Hello. And we've got Brent Weaver from K-State First and Tanya Gonzalez, who's a professor of English and interim vice provost, right?
Associate provost.
Associate provost. Yes.
Yes.
Thank you, Tanya. Okay. So we're going to go ahead and get started. Thanks, y'all.
Okay, so can everybody hear me okay? All right, I don't need to be seen. All right. My name is Policia C. Bender, and I'll be your moderator for today. So let's ask you guys some questions, and if you guys can like each take a turn answering the questions, that would be great. So question number one, how have you navigated standards professionalism in your life? We'll start from this end with Dr. Gonzalez.
How have I handled professionalism? Standards of professionalism. So I remember graduating from graduate school and being mentored about professionalism specifically. Thinking about being at that time a young person going into the academy and somebody who I looked when I first started my job looked younger or around the same age as my students that I was going to teach, as my grad students and as my undergraduate students. And so thinking about sort of I was really encouraged to create not a sort of an affect, right, of professionalism and to try to like dress the part, talk the talk, do the thing. And that's really good advice, but it caused me a lot of anxiety, I will say, because I felt like they were basically saying, you can't really be your authentic self, or that you have to dress a particular way or you have to be a particular way. And I don't think that's how it was meant, but that is just sort of the kind of low-grade anxiety that caused me, right? Sort of just nervousness about doing the job. So I think I've always had to navigate, and this goes a little bit into, I think, what we're going to talk about next, but I've always had to navigate how comfortable I was sort of being, gauging the professional space that I'm entering into. So obviously knowing that if I'm going into a job interview, that I'm going to present a particular professionalism that might not be the same that I do in my everyday professional interactions with those folks after I get my job. And so one of the things I've done is try to stay authentic to my personality, but also respectful of the situation. So thinking situationally, right, if my coworkers are more comfortable in suits and ties, then I'm going to dress accordingly, maybe not in a suit and tie, but definitely dress accordingly and think about my context as I move through my day. And I'll do that even now. I'll look through my schedule and just look at the context of my day and who do I have to interact with? What are the chances that I'll have an emergency run-in with a Kansas Board of Regent or somebody external like that. And then also just to be cognizant that if I have presentations or interactions with folks to be a little bit more professional than I might be otherwise, but also knowing that I'm going to be me. Me pops out no matter what I'm wearing, no matter what I'm doing. And that's okay. And that's actually the reason I got the job was to be me, right? So just being respectful of the context, being cognizant of the context, like keeping it in mind. And then just being honest with myself and with my colleagues as I move through the day.
Those are great points. Brent, what's your take on it?
Yeah, honestly, my thoughts are pretty similar to Dr. Gonzalez. I am in my first position still, so I've been in K-State for about 6 years. It is my first entry position that I've had. And I think that in particular, the first couple of years was a lot of like experimenting to figure out what is my authentic style. I had no idea. I had no idea what it meant to be professional in the workspace. So I remember like my first month was business formal to a T attire every day, sharply. I mean, punctuality is still important to me, but like would be like to campus by 7 a.m. I would leave at like 6 p.m. Like it was very much like the overdrive. And I realized that's not authentic to who I am. I am professional, I am punctual, but my answer is a lot of navigating and figuring out what was right. To echo something that Tanya has said, that I really believe I like to dress for my day, and I like to think about who I'm encountering. And for the most part, for me, it's teaching and it's working with students all day long. So I might not always dress business professional. In fact, I usually don't. I dress as you see me today, usually most days for that reason. So yeah, I think it was about learning not only like what my kind of personal professionalism meant, but also getting used to like the team dynamic of that too. So something that as I was looking at the questions we're going to talk about today, something that is a consistent through line is this idea of kind of team expectations and understanding as a group what you value and what you find important in terms of professionalism. So our team has kind of a document of just like shared expectations, like how we want to interact with people, how we want to show up in our workspaces. And so we collaboratively agreed upon those things. And I found that really valuable too. So I know I'll speak to that more later, but those are kind of the two key things I was thinking about, is slowly figuring out what my own professionalism is, but also making sure that it corresponds with the team and that we have like a agreed vision in those ways too.
Great. Like that. How about you, Kevin?
So I do want to make for me, my first job when I graduated from school was working for a TRIO program. And prior to that, I had worked for Avid, which I think had similar missions. Obviously, TRIO is a federal program though. And so in terms of dress, until more recently, for this position, I wore a tie, but where I used to work at, I didn't always wear one, but I'd always dress in a, slacks, dress shirt, because my experience has been that, and especially when I used to go to schools for TRIO, because I used to work with 6th and 12th graders, you wouldn't be treated the same. And so people do respect the way you dress. Like, I'll tell you, one of the best experiences when other people open the door for me because of the way you're dressed. I'm like, I'm really amazed by that, but it makes an impact, And then because of the students that I work with, I could see it makes a difference. So that's why that was never an issue. But on my free time, do I want to wear a tie and dress shoes? No, so I don't. The other thing too is that I stayed in touch and continue to stay in touch with my mentors, so my college professors, because I try to basically ask them for feedback to see what's going on and what do they think about like my different work experiences, just to gain their perspective, and that gives me insight too. And also they share with me like, hey, this is what's going on. And it's good too, because I feel like you need that connection with the people who know you since you were in that phase of your life, and it's helped me a lot. So and also I'm the type of person I like to ask people if I see something a certain way. I'll ask, like, so for in our office, Dr. Deborah Bolton, we share the same office area. So if she's there, I'll go ask her a question. So
I think that for me, professionalism is something that can vary depending on where it is that you're working and what the atmosphere. And so one of the biggest things that helps me kind of maintain my professionalism is being able to read the room and read the atmosphere. I've had jobs where I had to come jacket, heels, totally buttoned up. And then I've had other jobs where it was a more casual atmosphere, but then also trying to establish boundaries as well. So for a time when I first got out of college, I worked at a Job Corps where the students there were ages 16 to 24. And when I was working there, I was 26, so I was barely outside of the age range of the participants. And when I first got there, people thought I was one of them. They thought I was one of the students. And so I had to kind of separate myself and not dress as casually as some of the other staff, because it took a while for the students to really respect me and treat me as staff on that level, because they were trying to hang out and kick it. And they were just like, hey, girl. And I was just like, hey, boo, how you doing? But still maintaining that level of authority, and then having situations where students would cross certain boundaries because they just didn't see me as a professional. And so just depending on what your atmosphere there might be different things that you have to do to maintain that level of professionalism, whether it be changing up your appearance, changing up the way that you talk, because I'm from the South, and so everybody's a hey and a sweetie and a baby and a darling and sugar, and I can't sugar honey baby everybody everywhere I go. And so it comes down to really being able to read the room and then kind of adapt things to what's appropriate in that situation. So that's kind of helped me, is being flexible and being able to adjust.
I relate to that too, being from Georgia. And I had a coworker pull me aside and say, you always call me sweetie, honey, baby. And I didn't realize I was doing it. So I had to be more cognizant of what I was saying and how I was addressing people.
And so I don't
It's a
become an
major
HR issue.
Exactly. So our next question, how do you balance showing up at work with authenticity without jeopardizing potential opportunities? We'll start with Brent this time.
Yeah, it's a powerful question. And in thinking about this, reflected on the fact that I kind of lucked into a really positive, secure environment. As I think about future times where I'm in new positions, this will be something I need to actively think about. But, I think that an environment that helps you feel comfortable is one in which like all various parts of our identities are supported and respected. And so it's asking questions and getting curious about the environment you're in and if it does or does not support those kinds of things. So for example, as a gay man, I was like, my environment that I'm working in, it's never been an issue. It's never been something where I feel like I can't present honestly as myself in those ways. So I think it's about, as you think about the environment you're about to join, getting curious, like Teresa was saying, kind of reading the room of what is there, asking lots of good questions to kind of determine if it is like a safe place to be yourself in those environments. So I think that's the biggest thing, is I like to learn and observe my surroundings, which helps me then know what I can and can't do. And if I feel like I'm in an environment where I can't authentically be myself, if I'm able to, that's probably an environment that I'd want to remove myself from, because it can be pretty mentally taxing on you if you're not in a place where you can be comfortable yourself in like all of the different ways.
Kevin?
To me, communication is very important. So if there is something I've had an issue with, I'll try to talk to that person directly, or I'll talk directly to my supervisor. If I felt like, okay, this is how they run things, I'll respect that, and then continue doing the work that I've done. And I think one of the things too I'll mention is that when you graduate and you're an employee, it's different from a student in terms that if you speak up, companies can't let you go. And even though I only worked in higher education, and you do have the right to obviously talk to your employer, things like that, but it's a bit different than when you're a student. And to me, like, when someone's wronged me, I try to keep things in, I guess, in peace. And yeah.
I think that for me, it comes down to having to edit, honestly, and having to know when to separate that personal from professional. You don't have to like everybody at your workplace. Everybody's not going to be your bestie, but knowing how to speak to somebody that you know that you may have some workplace issues with, and being cognizant of tone, maybe even my body language. With people who know me in my personal life, I'm very open. I'm very unedited. What you get is what you get. I said what I said. Take that with you. That's yours. And in a workplace setting, yes, I still said what I said, but instead of saying I said what I said, I'm going to say, I maintain my position upon this particular point, and I'd like to, and I will, I'll edit and clean it up, and then we'll talk around it, so then we can come back, and then you can't go over to, to HR and say that I've created a hostile work environment. But the chick that people see at work, I tell them all the time, I said, that's not who lives in my house. I don't know her. She don't live with me. Because and I know that I have to. I'm a cusser. At my house, the cuss words are flowing. I like they're spicy. They just pepper up a sentence. Just tastes good to me, But can I just cuss everywhere I go at work? No. Maybe if I know somebody like that and we're in a certain setting in their office, but am I going to be here on a panel, F word and B word and blah, 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 and these MFers? No, I would never. Because I know that there's different consequences for my behavior here at work versus how I'm acting, at my house or on the weekend. And so I try to maintain awareness of that. Because it doesn't take much for a workplace atmosphere to go from being somewhere that you love to be at to being somewhere where you got to kind of get yourself together to even go in there. And, you spend the majority of your working or your waking hours on your work days at work. Nobody wants to be miserable during that time. So I try to do things for myself to create a good environment.
Yeah, I would agree with everything that you all said. I think that communication is really important. I think choosing your communication style is also extremely important for the situation. I try to be respectful of people and to also use a lot of kindness, not only towards others in my space, just knowing who they are, knowing like I don't know everything about you, or there's no way, as Teresa just brilliantly put it, there's no way you know everything about me or who I am in these contexts, right? But we can use mutual respect in order to kind of move outside of ourselves a little bit, to speak outside of ourselves and maybe what we're feeling, and move a little bit to more of a treating people as if you don't know what's going on with them. Like they can have lots of things happening personally that can affect their work environment and what they're experiencing every day. And same with me, right? So offering that grace to them, offering that grace to myself. The other thing I want to say about this is one portion of my authentic self has got a lot of imposter syndrome, like a lot of it. My husband says that I'm like the worst case he's ever seen. So that's something that is authentic to myself, that I can't perform that like in my workspace, right? But I have to deal with that, right? And so I have to be honest with myself. And again, like really thinking about if I want opportunities in my work, or if I have to be super brave. And that's something that I have to do. You have to be super brave to go in every day and learn what you don't know, to recognize what you don't know, be open to learning what you don't know all the time. And then to move in the faith that like that's going to be, and your self-grace, right? That's going to be okay. Because one of the things, I have wonderful colleagues and mentors. And one of the things that when it crops up and I say, okay, I'm just dealing with a little bit of imposter right now. They're like, we all have those moments, right? Even people that you would never imagine would have imposter syndrome, like your boss or your, we all have those moments where we deal with those kinds of things. And so just really remembering that, being honest, being respectful of each other, being careful with each other. And I mean that with like full of care for your colleagues, which is also really, it's a challenge sometimes, right? Because you don't have to like everybody. You don't have to be best friends with everybody. And you don't have to walk through this planet thinking that everybody needs to like you. But if you can treat each other with respect and have the courage to be honest with yourself and with others, but in a kind and careful way, I think that really does a lot to help you keep authentic, and then also keep the doors open for the professional opportunities that might be available for you to get a promotion, or to do work on a project with somebody that you really care, a project that you care about with someone, right? Because you might not care a lot about the person, but you care a lot about the project. Sorry, I was doing the teacher knee
It's
there.
important part of it.
I'm
Yeah.
gonna put that on a sticky note, so be brave every
Yes,
day. I
be
think
brave
that's
at
a really
work.
good
Oh
point.
my goodness.
Yes.
Yes. I hate public speaking. Oh my gosh, but I have to do it all the time. It's like
Okay.
really crazy.
Kevin,
Bye,
are you
Kevin.
stepping out?
Yeah, because I have to go to a meet, yeah.
Bye.
Okay.
It's good to see you.
Are there any standards that you believe are always integral to the workplace? And we'll start with you on this one, Teresa.
Well, we've brought up the word a couple times already, but respect, period. That is a no-brainer, and it's non-negotiable to me in the workplace. Once again, you don't have to like everybody, but you can show them respect. And even if they did something that you don't like, you can even be respectful in the way that you address that. And not taking it personal. Just because I didn't agree with what you said in the staff meeting, I'm not gonna catch you in the bathroom and be like, catch me outside. How about that? You know, it's not gonna be that kind of situation. But if it's something that we need to address, then I'm going to, either schedule a time, come to my office, I'll come to your office. Can we talk and sit and have a dialogue about this so that we can work together moving forward in a better, more productive manner? That's what I'm going to be looking for, is how can we accomplish whatever our goals or objectives are? And even if you just think that I am the worst thing since Beelzebub himself, we can still figure out a way to work together, because we work with these students. And so that's what I have to remind us. It's not even about me. When I come into work, it ain't about me. It's about these kids. How can we help these kids? And that's the question that I ask myself. Even if I don't like somebody's tactics, is this going to be helpful for these kids? Is this going to be something that these students are going to benefit from? And if it is, let me take myself out of this equation. I don't have to like it, but if this is going to be helpful for one of these babies, then let's get this done. And we can work together. And if you got the respect piece there, then all the rest you can kind of work around and it can fall into place. But without the respect piece, you're just kind of dead in the water. And so how can we work together and not be trying to work against each other and come together for a common goal? And once I can get the respect piece down, then the rest of it is hasty pudding. We'll figure that out.
Grant?
Yeah, so my response is going to be, I was thinking it was like kindness, but I think it actually is respect. Because I think we can, in general, just assume positivity and assume kindness towards folks. But there are cases, like you said, where it's like there is like a clear disagreement or there's a clear barrier in place. And so then the default for me then is just to be respectful and make sure that I'm you don't have to be negative when dealing with a negative situation necessarily, but that also means you can still be authentically about how you feel in a situation too. So I think you nailed it, Teresa, with respect. That's kind of the foundation. Because I was thinking about like standards. I'm such a like postmodern gray area person, and I think there's like really are no true standards, but I do think like respect kind of fuels its way into every little thing in some ways.
I 100% agree. I wrote mutual respect, and I put mutual in there because that's another important element of the standard of a work environment is mutuality of respect. Often you'll have situations, and again, these can happen because people are hurting, they're tired, they're whatever their situation could be, and that respect can lapse, in your interpersonal interaction. But just being able to recognize that that's not the usual, or even if that is the usual, there is something else going on. It's not about me personally, it's about them, right? That's their thing, and I can still engage with and encourage mutual respect.
Okay, I'm loving this already. So I noticed sometimes, well, actually, after the pandemic, coming back on campus, things seem to have shifted a little bit. And that's kind of what I thought about when looking at question number 4. How do you see workplace expectations changing in the future? And we'll start with you, Dr. Gonzalez.
Yeah, I'm hoping, so I think, the post-pandemic moment, right? I think of that too, right? Where we think it's a little bit more casual, maybe a little bit more like we're bringing our a more authentic selves to the our personal in-person interactions. A lot of the virtual scenario is also really tricky in terms of how do we signal professionalism in a Zoom meeting or in a virtual environment or a hybrid environment like one we're in right now. I still think though that 2020 was not just the pandemic, but it was also thinking a lot about being more cognizant and more conscious and more open about diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, social justice, anti-racist behaviors. I think when I think about the professionalism of the future, I hope that people cling to that what we've learned as a institution, as a workforce space, and continue to grow in that area. So my short answer is I hope that we have more mutual respect in the future as we move forward, because of what we've gone through and because of the differences in our professional, what we're asked to do professionally, how we're asked to interact professionally.
So kind of similar issue with the pandemic. I think that there's not a box that every employee has to be in order to be a professional. And a lot more employers are becoming more flexible. Not to where they're totally just individualizing people's work plans, but realizing that everybody doesn't have to do everything the same way in order to achieve those objectives. I think that a lot of more people are thinking outside of the box and are being more creative in thinking of ways to do stuff. And so that has been a good thing, I think, for a lot of people, especially people who maybe either have non-traditional situations going on, you got family, whatever else is going on. I think that a lot more bosses are willing to kind of meet people towards the middle. Because with this pandemic thing, nobody was ready for that. Everybody was calling audibles left and right, just off on the fly, and figuring things out. But I think that these bosses kind of looked a little bit more at the workers as the assets that they really are. These are the people who are helping me accomplish these things. These are the people who are helping me make my money. And I need to make it easy for them to be able to do their jobs and not stop trying to make work just hell in a handbasket for them, you know? And so I think that's something that I have seen a lot more are employers who are willing to step outside of their rigid, this is how these things have to go, my way or the highway. And how can I help you be more functional and productive in the job? And that has been something that a lot of people that I have known have found more refreshing is, you know, I didn't think that my boss cared about me as an individual or as a person. And a lot of these bosses are seeing these are people, they have individual things going on, and I need to be more cognizant of that and sensitive to these issues. And that's going to help me in the long run, because this is going to create that loyalty of that employer who's going to see the value of being here with me.
I think the flexibility helps us be more productive as well. There's less stress. Will my employer understand if I have a sick child or if I'm sick, if I have a disability or things like that. So being able to work authentically to who you are and you know, actually bring your life to work and have that be understood is very, I think it's very, it's integral to us being more productive in the workplace, not having to fit into this mold. How do you feel about that, Brent?
Oh, you're speaking the words I'm thinking, Felicia. I really think a huge shift since this post-COVID moment, whatever we would describe now. I've seen it in kind of like two spaces I occupy a lot, in higher education, but also I'm in the theater. Both places had some kind of rigid expectations when it comes to like timeliness, modality of work, all these kinds of things. Like, for example, like in theater, you would go to a show sick, like you had to do just to do that thing. And so I think now we are a little bit more aware of like barriers to equity that have always been in place, like needing an accommodation when I have a migraine or whatever that looks like, that we're more willing to kind of advocate for ourselves now, I think is something that's been powerful. And so I think that's the biggest shift, is maybe not even like what's been happening, but like how we respond to it and how we're willing to make these asks that we now know are totally appropriate to ask for.
Okay, so what advice would you all give to students who are joining the workforce? Anyone can go first for this one.
Yeah, I can kick us off with something I was thinking about. So I mentioned at the very start, I really lucked out into like the ideal work team environment that's very supportive, very positive, very affirming in all of the ways. But when I interviewed, I didn't have that as like an outcome in my mind. I didn't think about the fact that like team dynamic is critical. So I think like my biggest advice is as going into the workforce and interviewing is like view those interviews as much for you as it is for them. So knowing that you're interviewing your team, and obviously that there's a lot of like couching with that of like, we don't want to be like argumentative and like asking them all the things, right? But like, I think we still should view that as your moment to see like, what are your critical things you're looking for? And does this team give you those things too? So treating it as your own interview too.
I think that for me, I would tell them to always be open to new information, always be you're never the authority on everything. You don't ever know everything. And so always be willing to listen and learn some new stuff. Always be open to a new perspective, because whatever it is that you know and that you feel like you're a subject matter expert, it could be, it could be affected by your perspective and you staying in a certain lane and not having been exposed to something that someone else has been. And so I think that that is something that I have found valuable, is that no matter how good I think I am at my job, and I think that I'm the bomb.com. However, there's always somebody who has some information that I can glean and take from that can help me either, improve my performance, give me a better lexicon of understanding to people who may have come from different backgrounds or experiences that I've had. But never getting to that point where I just feel like there's nothing more for me to learn in a position has been very helpful for me.
With that growth mindset.
Yeah.
Yes.
As soon as I think that I'm everything, then there's a little bit more of the thing there.
I love what you just said, because I think who wants a job where you don't grow and
Yeah.
you don't learn something every day? Like, I love my job because I learn something new every day, and because I get to explore something and grow in some way. And so you want that in your first job experience, and you want to be confident, but also have that space of humility where you're gonna learn this thing. Like, you graduated from the university with a bunch of skills and a bunch of things that you've learned, and you get to take what the best thing that you got from a university experience is that you learned how to learn better. And that's something that you can keep going with in your whole career, which is really exciting. So so I 100% agree with both of you, actually, and your responses. I wrote 4 things down that I'm just going to list out. But think outside of yourself. So it's not only about you, it's about your team, it's about the group, it's about the goals and the vision that you're entering into. And also it's not all about you. So even if you have moments of difficulty and conflict, it could be more about the other person than it is about you. So take that perspective, and make sure that you protect your own emotional self in your workplace by recognizing that it's not necessarily you that people are lashing out at or have a problem with. It's something within what they're experiencing. So so try to kind of take other people's perspectives in mind when you're walking through this earth, whether you're in your professional space or in your personal space. Practice respect, obviously. Use mediators when needed. So if your problem is with your boss, then you need to find an HR person to help mediate that conversation. If your problem was with a coworker, you need to talk to your boss to kind of explain the situation. To go back to something I think Teresa said, talk to each other, talk to your coworkers, try to do that first. But if you can't and you're feeling stressed out about it, then do those other things I just said. So first, try to communicate with others. But if you can't do that, or if it's stressing you out to the point where you don't want to go to work anymore, then you need to seek assistance. And it's typically not from your mom. Your mom's not going to know what to do in those situations.
It's not. Unless your mom works for case.
Unless you're so, and then finally, just pay attention to your mentors and to the advice that's out there, whether that's something you look up online or somebody that you trust in terms of your mentors, which is what Kevin started out talking to us about in terms of his strategy.
We have a few questions for students. You guys have time to answer. So some questions from students that were submitted. One is, how does systematic white supremacy play a role in our society's idea of professionalism? And how is each panelist working to challenge that?
Guess I'll start with that one if you want. So I think that for me as a woman, I can just speak for myself as a woman of color. There are a lot of metrics that you are expected to live up to that may not be culturally relevant for where you come from. So like even talking about profession, like just hair for Black women, That's been a whole thing, is that the way that my hair just grows naturally out of my head, you think is unprofessional. Certain styles that we think in our community are perfectly professional and inappropriate are deemed unprofessional just because it's not something that they may be familiar with or they're used to seeing. But if I send my daughter to school, I sent my daughter to school one time with some Bantu knots, and they tried to send her home. Because her hair wasn't done. I was like, you crazy. I spent 3 hours putting those Bantu knots in. Are you crazy? Like, her hair is so done. It's overdone. It's more done than anything that's anybody else's hair in that school right now. It's done. It's done. But just even having to have who you are as a person be challenged in the workplace is some of the most frustrating, and it's just like, why do I have to not only know the ins and outs of my job duties, but then now I have to tailor and edit who I am for other people's comfort, just to be able to come. Oh my God. Okay, so there is something, and I don't know if everybody's what, but there's something that we call code switching. That I don't know a single person of color who does not do it in the work. I literally don't know anybody who doesn't have their, what we call our professional voice, or our, and you just get, yes, how wonderful, yes, yes, that's fabulous. Elucidate on that. We all have this fake voice that we will use in certain situations for other people's comfort. And so that is something that for me, I have, tried to, because I'm going to still be my same authentic, friendly, engaging self with this presentation that may not be something that you are used to, or that may not be comfortable for you. And guess what? You are going to love it by the time I'm done. That's all I have to do. All I can do is to continue to be myself and to continue to be somebody who is knowledgeable and personable and functional in the workplace, regardless of what presentation that you may get. And there are times when I will switch up things about my presentation on purpose to keep people on your toes. You don't know what you're going to get as far as the package that I may present in, but the contents are still going to be valuable and still going to be the same. And so you have to just kind of do your thing, which is be good in your lane as who you are. And people, they're going to feel how they feel about it, but you don't control anybody in any situation but yourself. And that's something that I had to learn. I don't have control over anybody but me in this situation. So what I'm going to do is present well. I'm going to make sure that I'm prepared, I'm knowledgeable when I show up. They may not like what I have to show up in today, but we're going to get past that, because you're going to hear what I have to say. So I don't shut up. I just keep on showing up and keep saying what I have to say. And if people pucker a little bit, that's okay. We all gonna be fine at the end of this. So. I don't know. Maybe I should have went last. I had a little bit, got on my soapbox and said all that.
No, I think it was perfect. I think that was a perfect response.
So I think what it highlights is like literally the workforce is designed for privilege, right? It's designed for people of power, people of money, people who are white, all of these dominant identities. And so I think about it like when we interview students, I always worry that that's going to be a system that like replicates itself. And so we think about things like there's no dress code for our interviews. We say we want you to feel confident. And so whatever confident means for you, that's how you dress for those moments. So I think there are little things like that we can do to help, but it is a huge system thing like you've been expressing.
Yeah. Like, have any questions from Zoom or anything? I think it's for me as well, when students ask, why do other students need safe spaces on campus? That plays into it as well, because for people who don't know that students of color code switch, it's very stressful. It takes a lot out of you to be someone else all day. So to be among peers or people who understand that and take a break from having to perform, those spaces are very important on campus to be able to do that. Second question, anyone can answer. How would you recommend handling workplace conflict in a positive way?
I think I kind of mentioned that in my other like pieces of advice kind of response, but I think it's really important to be respectful of each other. I think Teresa, you brought this up about setting up an appointment to talk to somebody about the problem.
Yeah.
Is such a good technique to to provide yourself the space to control that emotional knee-jerk reaction and to say, I do want to talk about this. I can't talk about this right now, but can we please set up a time so that we can work through this? Or they might not even know that they need to work through something with you, but hey, you can reach out to someone even the next day after someone's like hurt your feelings or you dealt with conflict, and you can say, you know what, I would really love to talk a little bit more about this with you. Could we set up 15 minutes to just kind of, or, you know, a 30-minute meeting? And they have the right to say yes or no to that, right? It's not like you want to blindside anybody with that conversation, but I think that there's a way in which you can create some of that space for yourself to emotionally grapple with what the conflict is, because that's the thing about conflict, is that it does affect us emotionally, and it takes a lot out of us in terms of how we have to navigate that. So providing yourself with whatever you need to be able to respond in a respectful and careful way, and that could be creating some time for yourself.
Okay, we have about maybe 15 minutes left. So one more student question. This is kind of a two-part question. How do you navigate professionalism when colleagues have competing definitions of this term? And how do colleagues get on the same page to ensure better workplace cultures and dynamics?
You gave that example
Yeah.
of yours.
And that's kind of the overarching thing I think about with this, is that I think there's actually preventative things that you can do first.
Yep.
It's like anytime I teach a class, work with a new group, new team, we always start by setting kind of shared expectations. Policy, we were in a meeting where we did this just
I love it.
this week. Yeah. And I think that the times where I've forgotten to do that, when conflict arises, I feel like I flounder a little bit more because we don't have like a shared set of values that we agree upon as a group, versus when you have conflict, when you have like these established values, it's so it's not easy, but it's there's a more direct path to progress, because you can say, you know, all right, our values are XYZ, and that can be a jumping board for those conversations, like you mentioned previously too.
To go to your example about how to set professional expectations, so not in a conflict related way, I like the example that you gave about also jointly setting the expectations for the professional expectations. So it's not just on the interpersonal interactions, right? But it applies to everything. So you can have that conversation, have that group meeting and do it regularly. Like, don't just do it one time, but do it, you know, every, you know, little mini retreat you have, like 2 times a year or whatever. Revisit those expectations that you all had set up back whenever you set them up, and like adjust as needed, see how things are going well. And it does a wonderful, it helps to make people feel at ease, whether that's about how they're supposed to dress, whether it's about how they're supposed to email people or address people via email, how they're supposed to, you know, what the expectations are for the whole team, and using that as a team building experience is just really, like you said, it just really helps to curb a lot of the conflict that's there. And it opens up the ability to talk about them as they happen, I would say, when you're reminded of that.
Managing expectations is always, I talk about that so much. And then making sure that everybody's a part of putting in on those expectations as well. I think that sometimes when people don't feel like they had a voice or they weren't represented, and something that they can get a little resentful and, you know, they a little terse, a little scratchy. But really making sure that everybody's input is in there and taken into consideration, and then just being a clear communicator. This is what we all know what the expectations are. Is anybody unclear about this? All right. And then having, you know, something that as a consequence or some sort of action that will come from, because everybody hates when we all know what the rules are, and you've got that one person that's pushing back and then nothing happens and then we're all just sitting there, so being direct and approach and addressing those behaviors as well, I think is going to go far in keeping everybody in that same pocket, because if nobody feels like there's any consequences, any actions, and nobody's been, so we just said that for what? And now what?
Believer in intervention.
Okay. And there's consequences for your actions and taking accountability for that. And so it's really important. And then being able to take that whole little finger pointing thing out of it. Do some self-reflection. What did you do in that situation that may have contributed to the escalation of the tension? Did you do a part? Did you have a part to play? Because I know I usually have I'll poke a bear every now and then. I'll poke a bear and then act surprised, but I got mauled. What happened there? It's not like I just was poking the bear. I don't understand. Why did I get, because poking the bear. Oh, got it,
There's a lot of
Yeah.
vulnerability too. I think that's why I said be brave. That's
Mhm.
that word.
Yeah.
Because I think there's a lot of vulnerability that's required to have what you just said, Teresa, that self-reflection. And to be able to say, oh, you know what? That was my bad. Like, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to imply, I didn't mean my words to mean this or to hurt you or to do whatever. Right. Like, but doing so in a way that's not just always capitulating or always like putting yourself, as the one to blame on everything, right? To be able to, and so one of the strategies I think here is practice apologizing in a way that doesn't like make you feel bad, or practice responding to a jerk, when they're not here, when they're not there.
Mhm.
And don't do it so much that it's like a wheel that doesn't stop in your head, but like don't put it on loop,
Yeah.
but like do the sort of like, because do it like when it's not a conflict moment, just practice how to like do like these generic moments, how to respond to these generic moments. And when you can practice that, then you'll be you'll never be ready because it's always a shock, but at least you'll be able to know that, somewhere close up to the top of your head, how to respond to that. And I think that has been such a like helpful thing, because there are certain things are just going to happen at work, and they're just going to happen. so how do you respond?
Well, and it's good to think through like, okay, this is going to be something that's particularly triggering if it happens to me. And then taking this in a safe moment or with a safe group of people to practice that, so that when it gets to the situation where it happens and it really could stress you,
Yeah.
it will still stress you, but like you'll at least have spoken the words.
Yeah.
already.
And as a leader, how to be, because you can lead even if you're not leading the meeting, right? But like, how do you perform your allyships too, to keep the group, it's not your own responsibility or only your responsibility to do this work, but it is something where if you've built that expectation as a team, you can be the reminder. You can do like, hey, you remember we all said we were going to do it this way, So.
You guys have been a wonderful panel. Thank you so much. Before we end, do we have any questions on Zoom?
I can double check one more time.
Thank you all for your time.
Thank you so much.
This was very informative, not just for our students, but for me as well.
Yeah.
So
I learned so much from you all.
I realized I feel like